done to now go past what we now think is a digital literacy program. So the current digital literacy program is not up to date concerning artificial intelligence. And what we're teaching in terms of digital literacy is maybe 6 to 7 years behind. Digital literacy is being now reevaluated and updated to manipulate things such as large language models. Small island states face difficulties in providing training due to limited resources and professional development opportunities. There's not a lot of professional development programs. Our teachers do not necessarily go and get what we consider to be colloquial training and programs and go, hey, I'm going to learn AI. They normally do it to certification, meaning that our teachers do certified programs that the ministry would recognize and therefore impact their pocketbook. Teachers may love being teaching, but let's be realistic. They're professionals and want to get compensated for their knowledge. There are not enough or any professional development programs surrounding large language models as yet for the teaching environment. It is more what teachers show the initiative to actually transfer those skills back into the school environment. So it's not a professional development track as yet, all right? So I just want to conclude by saying the combined limitation of data availability and the challenge of data representation for small island states like Barbados possesses significant obstacles to training our young people specific to artificial intelligence models. Characteristics such as cultural nuance, limited knowledge of Barbados and small island states may not be well represented in these data sets, especially in ChatGPT. And I can tell you a lot of times the AI says, as a AI only trained up to 2021, I have a limited knowledge of, and a lot of the time just because we have a specific nuance of the Caribbean that we do not necessarily publish in a way. And even publishing data online that the large language models such as GPT can pick up and use is not in a readily available form. Classic example, let me give this is a real life example. I'm trying to compare this is something I'm currently doing right now. I'm trying to compare the data privacy law of Barbados with the data privacy laws of Trinidad and Jamaica. And the only Caribbean region that it picked up out of the three, Barbados, Trinidad, and Jamaica, was Barbados. It had no reference for the Jamaica Data Privacy Act, all right, as well as the Jamaica or Trinidad. It didn't know, it couldn't find it online. It was, but it was not online in a way that was packaged that these language models can pick up. So therefore, it would impact even these language models being able to give us requisite data that we can use from our own experiences. The lack of representation can produce biases. We've talked about that before. Alan mentioned that, the biases that could come out of it. And it's serious because even from a point of view of Black people in the States have a problem even with these artificial intelligence tools picking up nuances in terms of even ethnicity. Imagine how is that is further now combined and challenged with the fact that we're not only a Black predominant region, but now we have these cultural differences in terms of how we speak and communicate. A lot of the times, for example, when I say, hey, Google, and I speak after that, right? And my phone will pick up, hey, Google, right? It sometimes doesn't translate what I say readily into a format that they can execute. So even how we speak as a region, these language models don't necessarily know how to deal with it, right? Today, these challenges hinder the development of AI systems in respective to who we are, right? And to effectively address this education need in small island states will become a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And we are certainly, you've raised several considerations that things we need to think about as it pertains to the level of availability of data and representation, as we certainly cannot avoid artificial intelligence, and therefore we do need to consider what it's going to look like and what it means and what policies and procedures to put in place for it to work effectively as it pertains to our education system, and how do we really look to reimagine education as we go forward in this highly technological world. Given time, I do want to encourage everyone who may have questions so far based on the first two presenters' presentations, Mr. Corbin and Mr. Williams' presentations. We are monitoring the chat, so I do invite you to place all your questions in the chat. They will be monitored, and we will be answering all questions at the end of Mr. Millington's presentation. And again, because of time, we are going to jump straight to Mr. Millington, and then we will take all questions after. At this point, I wish to welcome Mr. Edward Millington. He is the Principal Security Consultant at CARISEC Global, and he will be speaking to us on artificial intelligence and security. Welcome, Mr. Millington.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone. I just want to run off the heels of Stephen when he talked about the models itself and the data. And I will say that that's going to be extremely critical in training any AI system. In cybersecurity, what we're really looking at is in the sense of an AI system to be in itself to be very reliable, valid, safe, secure, to be resilient, as Steve was mentioning in terms of prompt injection, and that is the ability to enter certain commands to have AI operate in a way that it wasn't designed to or cause any particular issues. AI must also be accountable and also transparent. One of the areas that we also have a problem within the cybersecurity area, which you're going to get a little bit further into, is the ability to understand what goes on behind that black box or what goes on in that black box. Where some of the decisions make, how can biases or certain issues creep into the model itself, which can be compromised along its development stage. We also have a concern about privacy, which is very important when the input data or data is gathered, regardless if it's being authorized or not. Is that data going to be available for other purposes or by, in some cases or many cases, adversary, etc. We also looking at a fair in terms of what we call harmful bias managed. All these can be referenced within the NIST AI risk management framework. And what we're really referring here is any output delivered by SaaS systems, regardless within a customer service environment, financial, medical, whatever that situation would be, is not affected by some terminologies or methodologies based on the modelers. Now, to go a little bit further into the cybersecurity portion, many of you may be interested in. There are really two sides to cybersecurity when it comes to AI. There's the good side and the bad side. So I'm going to start with kind of the good news. AI is extension of machine learning, which some of us will be very familiar with when it comes to the antivirus solutions, the EDRs, the XDRs, and so forth, will help businesses to defend themselves against possibly AI-driven malware, in addition to other AI-driven phishing emails or AI-driven cyber criminal attacks. Why is that so important? Is that in today's systems, the constant evolution of cyber threats continue to change tremendously. And for businesses to keep on top of that takes a lot of resources, both from the human side and also from the technological side, obviously financial side. With AI-driven tools, companies have the ability to respond, even if we look at the NIST framework, or a particular framework deals with the identification, detection of threats. That's going to be very important, especially when you want to protect the user. You also have AI-driven applications, let's say within financial, medical, etc. You also want the AI to be able to provide and produce the necessary information that one can deem correct, able to respond, or able to take the necessary data and output a particular results based on whatever that environment is going to be delivering to it, regardless if it's going to be logs or input in terms of some medical history or whatever the situation is. It all boils down to this level of input. This is where it also comes into place, and I mentioned two of those there, the medical and also on the defensive side, because it all takes the necessary data to identify what threats are, in this case, maybe a physical or digital body, and how we can most probably mitigate it or risk manage it. Our next issue that we're going to be looking at is the using AI in tools in terms of incident management. In the history of any company, you're gonna also may suffer a breach. How can we determine that breach? How quickly can we identify it? Look at the root causes, et cetera, et cetera. AI is going to be very important in that particular aspect. And we see that there from Copilot and from other vendors like Palo Alto and so forth, using AI within the incident management team to able to quickly reduce that time, which we call dwell time, of identifying the threat and mitigating it, and also put the necessary security controls in place. But there's also a negative side, because we actually run out of time. There's also a negative side of AI. And this is really come to in terms of the cyber criminal aspect. You're going to have AI-driven phishing, voicemail, phishing, which is start with a V. You're going to have a liability of getting calls of someone sounding maybe just like you or maybe the boss. You're also going to have AI-driven phishing emails started with P, where you're looking at either a business email compromise situation, how to get that initial contact into the business itself. You're going to have quite a bit of AI-driven malware, the ability of malware to evade existing particular tools. We also have a possible situation where AI can be trusted in terms of responses. While the technology is still very young, the ability to still trust AI, I think, still needs some level of human intervention. So it's still very important, especially for those maybe incident management, maybe possibly human resources and so forth, will be able to monitor those types of responses that you can have from AI itself. It is a very vast area, especially when it comes to cybersecurity. And the idea is really to risk manage this rollout or the use of AI within the environment, regardless if it's in school environment or within government. You want to make sure that it is managed, the implementation is managed properly. Whatever procure solutions, that's something a lot of businesses have to look at. You have to be very careful. Many solutions say that they may be AI driven, etc. A majority of the time they are really a marketing ploy. So it's going to be very important that businesses really look at the tools or look at the dimensions on how they want to develop the business, what type of tools they use, and the type of maturity of those AI developments. Another major thing that Alan and Steve would have mentioned, the model of data. We hardly have any model of data when it comes to modeling for our system, except for if you're talking about cybersecurity attacks. But in terms of identifying and making sure that a product understand the culture and social alignments of what we call people within the Caribbean, it's going to be also very important that those things are looked at as we also procure solutions. So I'd like to say thank you to everyone. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Millington, and certainly thank you to all of our presenters. I am confident, like me, you all would have learned something new, and certainly your mind must be going around as you try to wrap your mind around the various concepts that were explored and explained here today. Particularly, Mr. Millington, as you just raised several considerations that businesses will need to look at when it comes to AI and how they do business now, and certainly how they consider AI when they're looking at their business operations and the tools that they're going to employ and engage for the functioning of their businesses. I am going to invite persons, because we are very cognizant of the time, that if you have any questions, to place those in the chat and to whom they're directed, and we will begin the question and answer period at this segment at this time. We do have some comments that I believe the presenters will want to respond to, so we will read those comments at this time. So our first comment is from Mr. Clark, and he indicated that we also need to consider the open source communities which have developed rivals to open AIs ChatGPT and Google Palm models. There are models which have similar capabilities and are much similar. So they can run on edge and on device, for example, baby AGI. He also said we have the opportunity to leverage open source to do research, train and catch up so as not to be dependent only on the large tech companies and their priorities. If you have any responses to those comments, panel, you can feel free to do so. Mr. Militant, I can see you're speaking, but you're muted.
Right, sorry about that. I think this is a brilliant line of Stephen we needed to mention in terms of the models and so forth. I think it would be fantastic where, let's say, the university or a particular entity group wants to come together, because I think the Caribbean cannot avoid this here. And being able to work with other entities, small, that we can customize AI for our particular environment would be very important. But like what Stephen said and also highlighted, we're not a data-driven region. So it means then that we have to start on an AI strategy or a digital strategy where we can start putting a lot of these things into actionable items, so that when that time comes, I mean, we're already behind time, but nothing stops us from really trying to ramp up this area. University, I think, is doing a very fantastic job of the college, etc. So I think that it would not take very long to, and then we also have the CTO on here, Mr. Rodney Taylor. It would not take very long to kickstart this digital venture, especially within the region. And Barbados, I think as I stated before, I think yesterday, Barbados is equivalent to a state in some parts of America. You know, while America is equivalent to some towns or states within in China. So that means then that we have to collaboratively work together to provide, I think, an AI-driven system. It might be slightly new because every Caribbean island is different, but the fact is, I'm saying that one thing I think that Stephen alluded to is keeping our identity. If we start using systems that are trained on other data sets, we're going to find that we're going to lose our identity here within the Caribbean, because we have to then conform.
Well, I think, Alicia, I just want to jump in there and say, because I got to address something before you wrap up too quickly, because a question was raised in the chat. I'm not sure if we had fully addressed, right, how AI is affecting the services sector. And I think we need to spend a minute on that, because this is BCSI, right? I was article on Sunday where I contributed to by Nation News Person. I said one of the areas that artificial intelligence is addressing the services sector is the fact that the services sector is driven by knowledge workers. So people who basically have a particular knowledge skill, you're going to see a lot of disruption, especially, let's look at lawyers. Right now, I can tell you, I have not gone to a lawyer to write a contract in forever, right? I think the basic tenets of a contract is understanding the two parties and then relating it to a specific country's laws. So if you have a situation where you start training your artificial intelligence model on the laws of Barbados, right, you can now actually just program in the building blocks of your contract, right, and your agreements. And I have been able to get some pretty decent memorandum of understandings and some contracts, right, out of artificial intelligence. And I think that it is the most disruptive right now to our services sector, from doctors, because I can tell you, even before WebMD, before AI was driven into the discussion, a lot of people saying, well, I checked WebMD and they said I have this disease or I have this problem. Now, compound that now with artificial intelligence that can now take your symptoms and continuously ask you to refine how you feel, could now give you a diagnosis, right? And if it's nothing that requires immediate medical attention, you can now have artificial intelligence basically advising citizens of small states on their medical characteristics or any medical issues, and you're going straight to the pharmacy and asking for over-the-counter stuff, all right? You can even go further into the hotel sector. One of the areas that the hotel sector can benefit from artificial intelligence is not just data mining, right? But being able to actually feed into things that pertain to guest experiences. If you understand, and this is the thing, we don't collect data, right? If we did collect data, we could export ethically that data into large language models that can give us better insight into our guest experiences. And although a lot of the online people now will want to see us do more with the services, I am glad we attacked it the way we did, because right now, to get to this honeymoon phase where we can have these benefits to AI, we must get our building blocks correct first. We must start collecting data. We must start getting our people trained in the benefits and limitations. So therefore, to not have a pie in the sky concept of what it can be, because we have this, AI is going to come for all of our jobs type thing, is going to start walking amongst us and taking over our life. That's not necessarily the reality that will come to pass, but we must first engage in a better understanding and awareness, start collecting data in a usable format to be able to benefit from artificial intelligence in its current form.
Right. What I want to do is add and drill into that a little more with respect to that question about building out our own AI. No, just remember the biggest third of elephants in the room is our digital infrastructures. Very poor region, as Stephen said. We don't like to share information. And that then becomes the albatross around our neck, our unwillingness to share information. So I made 2 points. One is that there are open source models. And you can come up and you can use those open source models. You can call it Barbados GPT or whatever you want to call it, and use that as something particularly unique to Barbados. But you still have to build the digital data. The other thing that's going to happen, no matter where you are in the world, businesses and organizations will have proprietary data. And so what we're dealing with now, like ChatGPT, that's mass data off of the internet or whatever sources they're getting information from. What individual organizations and units are going to have to do is to build out their own specific system, AI system, specific to their particular industry or business and so on, so that they can protect their data, right? So they either, so I'm saying, so there's another layer to it. So even there within the country or within the organizational unit, the business, you still have to build a digital infrastructure. If you still have writing bills, for example, in your service industry, and you're not somehow converting that into something digital, you're not going to be able to make use of the capabilities of AI. So what the big sea change that we have to, one of the things that we have to do is start thinking digitalization of data, of information that we have. That's very critical to anything, because it's like having a car but no gas. That's my comment on that. Yeah, I finished. Anybody?
Thank you all very much for those very good comments that we certainly can build on. However, we do have some other questions that I do think we do need to respond to. So we have a question here: what regulatory considerations, Mr. Millington, you could probably tackle this question. What regulatory considerations should Barbados consider given the overall impact of AI? For example, the forthcoming replacement to the Computer Misuse Act and the Data Privacy Act.
I think that somewhere inside the chat is pretty smart to really expand it. I think really and truly, in terms of, let's say, a cybersecurity event or incident that is AI driven, who's responsible? I think that this is where, like what Stephen would have mentioned, I think it's the Caribbean or even Barbados right now is right to start looking at technology development for the next 10 years as much as possible. It'd be very difficult to do that, but they need to. And look and see like what existing laws make sense in terms of going forward. I think that those are some of the pertinent questions that would have to be asked. Who's liable? how can we track down, all those are type of things I think is going to be very important when we start looking at legislation. And I think to jump straight in it will be very risky. We're going to need to take time, look at the technology, look at the ins and outs, and then look to revamp our regulatory and law system.
Thank you. I certainly hope that answers it certainly to me does answer the question, but if there are any follow-up comments based on the response that you would have received, Mr. Robinson, please feel free to put it in the chat. We have another question by Ms. Motley, and her question is, this is a question for the entire panel. So what extent do you believe that AI should be regulated, if at all? I'm each
I would
explaining
say that
2 minutes to each of you.
That may be a global question, because right now the EU is looking to put guardrails on the, I guess, the regulation of artificial intelligence. And there's so many moving parts to it. I do believe that it needs to be regulated, but I still say it is early days yet. I can't imagine right now a specific thing that needs to be regulated. I mean, it's like the early days of the internet. A lot of people felt like the internet should regulate it earlier, but it might have killed the innovation that we are experiencing right now. I think what it does need is monitoring, right? I think that part of monitoring is for governments to pay attention to it. I'm going to jump there back to the issue of our laws. Since I was the IT consultant for the upcoming cybercrime bill, what I can say is, yes, AI was not a consideration, right? But AI is not a consideration from a legal standpoint or drafting of laws with any country yet. The closest region / country, and they're not a country, they're a region, right, is the EU. EU has a working paper right now that anyone that's interested in seeing where this thing may go to in terms of what a regulation may look like can go to the EU and look at their draft policy on the guardrails for regulation, right? I didn't get a chance to read it as yet, but I can tell you, because of things such as the general data protection regulation, they have been the world standard for data privacy. It stands to reason that something like AI, the EU may be the region that the world looks to for any regulation. But at this point, I would still, for the Caribbean perspective, I would still do regulation and concentrate more on education and awareness.
Right. I saw a comment in passing about, that said that AI can't be regulated, but certain aspects of there needs to be legislation governing a whole certain aspects of AI. But the commenter was partially was somewhat correct overall. When you look at on a broad, we're just looking at AI. If you and I see Adam Hope made a reference to you don't want to stifle the innovation. So what I would say on that is that at an individual level, you really need to look, be cognizant, or even at a country level. You can't regulate, because if you regulate AI to the point that that stifles innovations, the Chinese aren't regulating it. The North Koreans aren't regulating it. So what happens is that you fall behind because the technology is out there in open source already. So you really need to be very creative and be very targeted in what aspects of the regulation that you're talking about. The issues related to data privacy and so on are very important, right? Misuse of computer misuse, that sort of thing. But just using a broad caption to say, well, regulate AI, you can't do that, because Pandora's box is already open. You can't put it back in, because there are actors out there who already have it, and they will work on it and then come at you, and you will be lost. So the challenge that you have is how we make use of the short term, the AI systems in the short, medium, and long term, right? In the short term, we don't have a digital infrastructure. So our challenge is, well, how do we use the AI tools to our benefit? And as somebody put in the chat, especially with reference to the service industry. Well, there are people already doing it. I was talking to a guy, I myself, a pretty extensive user of the technologies. And I was speaking to a guy who is more in depth in the weeds of IT. And he says that he's been using IT tools over the past few months. And that work that would normally take him 4 weeks, he can do in 1 week by using the existing tools. So our first challenge is, well, how are we going to make the maximum use of the existing tools as we transition to the next phase of AI? Because, and I say that within the context of also, there's a very important thing. And I mentioned, I must bring, and I want to bring in the detail of this. I mentioned about AI agents as distinct from large language model, which is close. What happens is that if you combine an AI agent with, or at least when they eventually get around to combining AI agents with large language models, you are going to the next level. And I will give a very simple example. Suppose you were planning a birthday party. You can go on ChatGPT or Bing or Bard or whoever. And you can say, well, plan a birthday party for me. It will say, well, first you needed to prepare a guest list, order all the stuff, select a location, get some food, you know, all that sort of thing, prepare the guest list, all that. You could go on ChatGPT, you could generate a listing of what are the key activities related to planning a birthday party. If you add AI agents, which actually carry out tasks, even in its most basic, or what the AI the difference with that the AI agent adds, or is that it will go through your contacts, and based on any criteria you set, it will automatically send the emails. It will send out the emails. So whereas thing was say prepare a list with the names, with an agent, the agent will actually do the email, right? It will actually take you, if you want to do online order, it will actually, if you want to order food for the party, like you can do in the US, it can recommend a menu, it can create a menu, and it can autonomously order. Once you give the instruction, plan this meeting, it will, this birthday party, it will actually go and start actioning the items that are on the planning list. And so that's the next wave that's coming. That's like a variation of autonomous car. If you get autonomous car, you actually car and say, well, carry me down Bridgetown, I want to get to the bank. The autonomous car will take you there, right? Okay. So what I'm saying is that we are here, we got to be here, and we can do a lot now. Yeah. But there's other phases coming that you know will have to shift, because even the part that some of the parts that you're doing now, the AI systems will start also doing those too. So you know, go and look to see what is your next trick as you look to move ahead with the with the AI and move forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Corbin. We will certainly come back to hear some more of your perspectives, but we do want to hear Mr. Militant's comments on this particular question, and we do have to move on to the other questions because we really do want to get through all of them. So, Mr. Militant, 2 minutes, please. You're muted.
Yes, sorry, but actually less than that. In terms of time, I think that the regulations, we don't right now, I'm aware of designing AI. So I think any form of regulations or laws to put in place is really, I think, too premature at this point in time, except to look at the future, as Alan was talking about. I think we have a lot more pressing issues in terms of very, 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 very soon, looking at seeing within the rate, within the last 2018, 19, to where we are right now in terms of how AI is involved and where we expect to go in 2025, definitely by 2030, we really need to look and see how AI replaces humans within the particular environment. What we have to look and see what we have control in and what are some of the abuses that can definitely occur. So I think to rush to stop AI in its delivery or deployment or anything to that fact will be very premature. I think it's going to be advantageous for humankind. It's going to help in terms of infrastructure management, design, etc. We have a coastal zone that definitely needs some level of work and the ability to take that data and train a system and have the necessary output in terms of managing things like that is going to be very important. I can see government, since I heavily a lot in governance, can really see a better use of AI in certain areas. It doesn't mean that others will start doing the work, but the fact is that there's a lot of positive stuff that could come up with it. And I think that prematurely looking at any form of tightening AI within an environment, it's just going to happen. It's just going to happen. At the end of the day, businesses are going to be looking at whatever financial gains. I mean, we must be honest. And deploying AI within a business environment is going to be advantageous. What we want to do is to make sure that that is done very safely and well within our environment.
Thank you very much, entire panel. So Mr. Hope did say in the comments, let us not spend all of our time looking at the negatives, but certainly looking at the opportunities. And he sees it as a positive disruption, not only negative. And that certainly falls in line with what you were saying, Mr. Millington, that certainly it will be advantageous to the business, our business operations. Ms. Motley has a comment and she says, as a lawyer, I do not see it disrupting my work in a negative manner. She thinks that it would shift the legal landscape to have AI be used as a tool for increasing productivity as opposed to replacing the profession, especially as data gets, especially as data losing, okay. All right, sorry about that. I lost some of what she said. But especially as data sets grow larger, AI tends to become less accurate. Mr. Taylor does agree, and he says he's not sure that he wants AI to argue his case, but certainly to act as an aid for his lawyer. So the next question go ahead.
No, I want to challenge that because that's the thing about data. The more data you have, the more accurate information is because you get less bias, and that's part of the problem. The data sets are small. So the more data you have, once it's vetted, the more accurate the output becomes. That's what's happening with something called emergent capability. What emergent capability within AI is the fact that, as the researchers were saying, the AI at one point, right, I don't think they trained GPT, for example, right, to know how to write Arabic, right? And then all of a sudden it knew to write Arabic. It didn't train it. AI is beginning to be able to train itself to solve these problems. And the thing about it is with artificial intelligence is that the more data you feed it, which is part of the issue of privacy, the smarter it becomes. It doesn't become less smart or less accurate. It becomes more accurate as it can now compare and contrast data sets and data use over a period of time. Go ahead.
Okay. Right, so I'm trying to really get to the questions. There's a lot of back and forth pertaining to CSC using artificial intelligence, but teachers not having computers. And certainly there's agreement with Ms. Motley's point as there are nuances to legal drafting, for example, which AI is unable to capture.
But I think that it's only a matter of time that that's going to be the case. And like I said, it will come to a particular point when if you go back to regulation, is at some point in time, a human being is going to be replaced. So at the present time, due to limited data sets and the maturity of AI, that is something I think that we need to look at. But it will get better over time. There's definitely no doubt about it. And looking at the rate of it, especially going from GPT-4, ChatGPT-4 to now quite soon to release Google this morning or maybe yesterday, Palm 2 and so many others. It's just only a matter of time that we're going to see changes within the environment.
Yeah, one of the things that has come out with respect to this, certainly with ChatGPT, one is as they add more data, as they add more data sets, it actually becomes more accurate. The other thing is that, and allow me the point that he just made, is that you can, I thought right over my head. Let's pass on it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clark has another question. Do we want to regulate AI or enforce our existing laws against bad actors? A lot of the concerns about artificial intelligence are its potential for mass misuse in terms of IP theft, misinformation, libel, identity theft, etc., which, correct me if I'm wrong, we already have laws against. Does anyone want to respond to that?
I think that again, regulations can help, but at the end of the day is who they hold responsible in cases like this here. Once you can track and see then the uses of the AI by a particular entity, then fine. This is where I think Stephen would have mentioned it is obviously a hole that won't be put in terms of, let us slow down. Let's look at some regulatory or monitoring, or look at that like what we have in America and also in Europe. I think it's something that needs to be looked at to see what can be resulting out of it. Really have the legal minds, the IT or cybersecurity minds put together on that. I don't Stephen have any thoughts on that there, or even Alan.
The target is moving too much, and as you point out, the target is moving so much. It's expanding and moving fast, and so as I said, there can only be some narrow areas that you could probably look at. But in terms of AI itself, what you do is, and I'm very thinking about how book raising this point. We could just focus on what are the opportunities, the weaknesses or the gaps in AI are opportunities at this time. So the key is at each leg, what you try to do is to take advantage of it. So if it has weaknesses, that's where the human beings continue to thrive and can make tremendous gains on it. And help mitigate.
Let me jump.
Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
Let me jump in and say, I don't want to keep going back to the fact that this is a BCSI event. I think one of the things going forward has to be, and Harlem was right, we are technical people, but AI is not a solution in itself. One of the things that, and I take blame for myself too, right? I would consider myself where technical people are speaking to people who have a different perspective on how technology to be used. I would never sit down and profess to know how AI is going to directly affect the legal profession. I believe that what should happen next is that the different sectors, technological people engage with and say, well, look, this is the problem that we're having in, for example, the legal profession. We have a large, vast amount of information to get through. How do I manage all of this information, right? And this is how my information is right now. This is the output that I want. I think too many times we get IT people to then discuss how it should work. And I think that's tail backwards or ass backwards, excuse the French, right? Because I would never profess to say, well, I have the answers for the legal profession. I have the answers for any particular sector. I think it's incumbent now for the sectorial players to say, well, look, I heard about this artificial intelligence thing, all right? Get a round table of IT players together, yes, because we're part of the discussion, but I would love to hear the problems pertaining to the tourism sector. I would love to hear the problems pertaining to the legal sector. And then maybe through that, we could then have what Shannon is talking about, maybe some hackathons, right? Where we can now document the problem, because we see the problems in different perspectives. You ask a technological person, what's the problem in the tourism sector? They can give you a technological answer. If you ask the tourism sector or different sectoral players, what's the problem? They give you that sectoral problem or answer that they need. What we need is discussions with those sectors right now. And we've never gotten that done in Barbados, ever gotten it done.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. This conversation is certainly quite riveting. I am going to allow Dr. Pearson Broom, lecturer at UWI Cave Hill, to speak. So Dr. Broom, go ahead and raise your comments and questions.
Good morning, everyone. I was following the discussion because we're busy doing a lot of work at the university in this area. With reference to regulation, it is exceptionally difficult to regulate AI at this moment. It is an exceptionally competitive industry, and they're all, as I said in the chat, falling over each other to be better than each other in terms of the final product that they wish to produce. So even if we attempt to regulate this month, something that ChatGPT has done with ChatGPT 4, by December or August, a new version of it is released with new commands and different modalities, and your regulation is already old. So what has been happening is an essential wait and see as to how it will settle down as a technology. Italy banned GPT from schools, but it doesn't matter because you can download it freely. So yes, you can't use it in schools. New York did the same thing, but you can download it on your phone. This means, for example, that as much as you can try to impose a ban, it will not necessarily work. In terms of education and teachers, it is a very difficult thing to do in Barbados when teachers don't even have basic technologies in schools. At the university, we have Turnitin in order to detect AI. Attentive lecturers will be able to see when students are cheating or using AI. But in secondary schools where several don't even have more than 1 or 2 projectors, it will be very difficult for teachers to detect when a student is using AI unless that teacher is really locked on to that class to know the speech patterns of the students in the class to say, well, this is not the kind of language you ordinarily use. Did you actually write this? That is one of the issues that you have to also be able to think about. I saw comments there about how it will affect the legal profession. Lawyers will not be gotten rid of. Lawyers will stay. What will happen is that some of the peripheral things that lawyers do, like the office attendant and dictating the email, for example, they may be able to do generic copies of an email using AI and then doctor it to a specific case, for example. So you may not need your office attendant as much as you would like. For lawyers as well, for those of you who are trained in British law, well, to a large extent, most of those cases are online. So if I want I don't know, an opinion, a generic opinion, I can probably type in the prompt and it can give me an opinion. You will then need to take that opinion and doctor it to a specific case if I decide to hand over the case to you. I saw Hallam Hope writing about positive developments in AI. To some extent, there is. But for developing countries, I'm finding it hard to see. For example, we wanted call centers to come to Barbados and several Caribbean countries. Why would I need a call center now when I can use an AI to give me customer service on generic products? So the call center phenomenon can find itself being appended. The other concern, like for journalists, in writing stories, for example, some major newspapers are now building into their work processes guardrails to stop journalists from submitting stories that are totally written by AI and then passed on. As I said, it is a very difficult technology to put your hands on because I can write an AI-generated article, put it in Quillbot, which is another AI. It would change up the prose, for example, by using synonyms, for example, then put it in originality, for example, another AI. And by the time I'm finished, it looks as if it's my work. It is not. So if you are not fully aware of all of the challenges that are actually occurring and how this technology is evolving and morphing, there are a number of unethical approaches that will be allowed into the workplace and you wouldn't recognize what is going on. Now, we are here discussing AI, but the Ministry of Foreign Affairs formed a metaverse in the universe. I don't know what that is. And how will AI now work with this metaverse? Will it now put the metaverse to rest, or can AI and metaverse work together, and in what areas, for example? So these are some of the challenges that we're having. Regulation is a very philosophical approach. The Chinese have regulated it, are regulating it, busily doing so to stop the Americans having a dominance in it. The Americans have adopted a laissez-faire approach. We don't want to stifle innovation. Let's see what these guys are going to come up with. The British are following the US. The EU, as I said, they're at a crossroads. Too much regulations will destroy innovation, creativity, and competitiveness. Their fear is that if they allow no regulation, it would be a breach of privacy, issues of security. AI will become a treasure trove for misinformation, disinformation, shaping the populations in ways that they never imagined. And that could be very difficult for the EU in times where information and truth and post-truth are common across societies. So when we are looking at this idea of AI, it calls for very, very nuanced approaches as to how we're going to approach it. It's not only now using language, they're now on the, well, some of them are already on the cusp of using images to be able to scan images and be able to provide feedback on what you can do with this particular image. Deepfakes, Val-E, for example, with language, for example. So stakeholders must be acutely aware, must work together in order to keep tabs on it. But it cannot be an individual agency doing it, or else typically you have policy instability, policy uncertainty, and that can lead to or lack of data collection, or indifference to technology and development, or indifference to a kind of a Luddite approach to how we use technology in society. Thanks.
Alicia, if I may just add a little bit, because I know we're out of time right now.
Right,
I
so
think that's
one minute, Mr. Militant. I will
Right.
let you.
No problem. I think one of the major concerns that we have in this field, and it's reflected in all of the major countries, is to make sure that the AI development, its whole life cycle development, I think the regulation might be a very strong word, but the idea is to make sure that the AI does what it's supposed to do. And I mentioned in terms of transparency, reliable, viable, and so forth. From what the gentleman just said, that's the part that's going to be very important to make sure that AI do not be a mouthpiece for the adversary in the sense of misinformation, disinformation, leading you down the wrong avenue, have major biases, can be compromised in the sense of a legal case. Someone can actually go in and change the models and so forth, or models could have been corrupted in the very first place, and therefore the outcome is always going to be a certain bias. So all those things are going to be very important. And I think we need to keep that in key as we start to look at AI and its deployment within the service sector, etc.
Thank you very much. I also want to really thank Dr. Broom for his intervention. Certainly, it was very informative and definitely quite useful as we seek to understand AI. And certainly what he said is we need to take a very nuanced approach to it. But we are out of time, and I do want to give our presenters 30 seconds to wrap up. So Mr. Militant, I feel like you had your minute, but now
yes, I did.
I am going to give Stephen, and I'll end with Alan. Each 30 seconds, gentlemen, just to wrap up your final ideas, and we will close.
Quickly, this was not a silver bullet presentation. What I want to see going forward is sectoral participation in the discussion. I am looking forward to BCSI leading the services sector with further conversations on artificial intelligence. And yes, it might have seemed negative to some, but what I will say is that you have to get that elephant out of the room. We can start by being optimistic and doe-eyed, but at the end of the day, I appreciate the fact that we took a particular position as a group, and now we want to talk about the opportunities with sectoral representation. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan, your 30 seconds.
Okay. So I'm just going to end with a very simple. The recent developments with ChatGPT, large language models, the state that they are, even with their weaknesses, the weaknesses present tremendous opportunities. And going forward, the use of artificial intelligence will become the key defining feature factor in the world. And I would say that it's equivalent to a category 10 storm that's hovering out there. A lot of people don't even realize it. And you gotta realize that it's there and figure out how you're gonna convert the energy from that storm into a positive for the country, or are we going to be level? That's all I want. I'm finished.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the board of directors, the executive director, and the entire team here at the BCSI, I sincerely want to thank you, the presenters, for coming and sharing this information with us today. This session certainly would have been absolutely meaningless without you, our participants, and we really do want to thank each of you for coming for this, your questions, your comments. I do see several comments in the chat that we need to make this a series. We certainly do intend to make it such, because this is a conversation that needs to continue. Certainly, we have barely scratched the surface today, and we do want to continue the conversation. So please do look out for further notices on future webinars and discussions around the topic of artificial intelligence. I did see another suggestion for export. We have several conversations to be had, and as we go through the year, please do look out for information from BCSI on those particular webinars, and certainly we do intend to have some in-person conversations, so look out for that as well. I again want to thank you, Dr. Broom, for making your vocal contribution. I want to thank all of you for typing, and I want to thank you all for attending. I do wish you all a fantastic rest of the day, and go in peace. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope I wasn't giving y'all guys too much of a hardship, but I really appreciate what you guys were saying from the cybercrime side of it. But you know what I mean? I live in the world of opportunities, and I might teach my students, right? All the things that can happen in the area of art, creative industry, the legal profession has a lot of opportunities as well. But don't think I can't know too hard on y'all cybercrime guys, okay?
Of course not.
The issue that we face with respect to this matter require very, very frank discussion, you know, in the fashion and the tours or anything like that. It's a very serious situation, both an opportunity and a threat. And we got to turn it into opportunity. So
I
spoke
to art students at BCC about 2 months ago, and I gave them some of the challenges and problems I just mentioned as well. I even showed them art that I got the AI to design, which I believe I could probably sell. And one guy told me, man, that art look real shallow. So of course, what's shallow to one person, it might be brilliant art and somebody else. But the point I'm trying to make to them is that they have a lot of opportunities to design both their art, make it into NFTs, put it on a global market. And NFTs are now being used in areas, for example, real estate. Okay, and look at the legal profession. Yes, the legal professional the lawyers could retrain their admin people, and they could develop AI with all of the laws and what's not in Barbados. And those lawyers could become more efficient. Can Harlem Hope go and get an affidavit from ChatGPT? Yes, I did. Yes, I can. Can I improve on that? Yes, I can. But I'm not a lawyer, you know? So there are a lot of professions that are not going to be necessarily disrupted in a huge way, but yes, they can be in some ways. I don't see time right now that we're going to be going into Sheffield or Kentucky and robots going to be giving us our services simply because the economy simply cannot afford all of this technology that people talk about. So all those jobs that some people think we're going to lose, I'm not sure we're going to lose all them jobs right now. But there are some areas clearly where technology will disrupt us and the opportunities to learn and retrain people to use the technologies more efficiently. That's my basic thing. But I see a lot of opportunities. Alan, I see tons and tons of opportunities. That's why I preach to my students. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I must say the opportunities, there are deficiencies, and there's the cost of the technology, talking robots and machines like that. So we have an opportunity now to see how we can take advantage of those particular situations. And that has to be your mindset, because the changes are coming, and you have to develop a mindset of how are you going to make use of whatever it is that's available to move you forward. If not, you're going to be in trouble. So
and you still have to look at the dangers that your guys recognize, the dangers that Edward and Stephen recognize in terms of the technology dangers and challenges, So those are clearly there, right? Anyway, I got to run. I don't want to take any more time, we could talk some more about this there.
Yeah, we said, Alan, it's true. The dangers are there. Can't ignore it. In life, as soon as we step out through the door, with so many satellites up in the sky, you have to want to know something when they drop down on you. But that's it's just I call it the yin yang effect. You always have pluses and you always have negatives, and the idea is to make sure that we have the necessary awareness in there, regardless of that comes from regulatory or laws, whatever it is that we are aware that we try to minimize, the misuse of certain technology like that there, in terms of going forward.
And I can make a little point here. A lot of people, it's a reference to the Chinese. The Chinese have been pushing the US and all those places using artificial intelligence in the background. The Chinese have been using artificial intelligence to manage and control the thing. As a matter of fact, what people don't know, the Chinese have some cameras, they developed some cameras, right? That for thousands of people walking on the street, they can pick up everybody and use artificial intelligence and identify that you are the person that they're looking for.
Correct. For a long time. This is for a number of years. Management it has been there. But what I think that we need to be so concerned of these days is the use of AI in an environment unknown to us as people, where we are being monitored and maybe cataloged or model for some particular nefarious, whatever it would be, because remember, these models are still young. So I can look at and see, maybe you see that gentleman, Mr. Corbin, he is a criminal in making, and we need to surveil him even more.
Just briefly. Sure. It is not to say that the Chinese have not been active in AI. AI has been around for quite a while.
A long time.
It has been around. Long. The idea of regulation, as I said, is deeply philosophical. The Chinese have been able to regulate the metaverse in their equivalent of Chinaverse. Mm-hmm. They're regulating AI. They came up with an equivalent called Ernie. It crashed, but they're working on something very similar. Yes. If they start to regulate, would we like the kind of regulations that they put in place? The answer to that will be a resounding no.
Correct.
Now, so we can't use that very dirigist approach to regulation. Well, I don't know if we can, but we wouldn't like it. So it's not that you can't regulate it, but if you regulate it, you will cull other aspects of your freedoms into the regulation. And that would not augur well for what we understand as liberty and democracy. As I said, when you're looking now at what the EU is doing, they are in a dilemma. They too want to regulate it because it exposes the European Union to all kinds of information leaving them, and that data will no longer be data localized. So the EU is fighting against an underlying problem of data localization staying within the EU and not being used by a tech giant from the USA to capture information that will undermine the privacy of their citizens. So they also have to deal with the idea of how much regulation, too little regulation. So they're in a conundrum. The US has already kept its attitude of leave well alone. That is their ideology. Let innovation take its course. The UK is doing the same thing. China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Cuba, for example, they have all banned it. So when we talk about regulation, we have to be able to think that, well, if I ban this aspect of LLM, will it also undermine other aspects of my freedom of expression and freedom of articulation in other equivalent technologies like social media? If you ban it in chat AI, in chat GPT and others, Bing, for example, then you may have to look at it in terms of TikTok, WhatsApp, and others. Do we want then regulations that would cut across all forms of technologies, destroying what we have come to appreciate as our freedoms?
Dr. Broom, you're hitting there in terms. I personally believe we should be encouraging young people to use the AI for research purposes or whatever, but it's still up to the professors or whoever to recognize, listen, this guy is being lazy, we have to turn it in or whatever, and I got marking out real hard because he has done no work, he just used a machine. But here's the thing, the technology, and I Steve, like know that I talk about blockchain and crypto assets and that. So the technology has actually arrived in the area of trading and investing, right? Whereby the banks have been trained and some regulators have been trained to crush this thing, right? But the technology is so much now enabling the individual that the individual now has the power over the government, over the regulators, over the legislation, okay, over the banks, over the central bank, over all these institutions to use this technology now, because we have decentralized finance, for example, and to actually make money and to earn and do well. I teach students about successful trading and investing, which I believe we should be teaching children as young as 11 and 12 years old. And once we give them the right tools, give them the right information, they can now be empowered to achieve things. And the beautiful thing about the blockchain and crypto asset technology, I would argue, it comes in twofold. First of all, you can use it for your own personal gain. But now it's another area of knowledge where you can develop. I mean, I said this thing like 5 and 7 years, every day and every night, and you could teach these people to get involved and immerse in these technology and understand them and get the knowledge and understand in real depth. And then now they can be teaching and providing a service that they can also earn money from, right? So there are many options that we can tie in AI not only to other areas of technology, blockchain, and crypto assets, and cryptocurrencies. For example, the artists, all these artists you have some fantastic artists in Barbados, and all of these could be looked at developing some of their art as NFTs and putting it on a global marketplace. I have contact, we have WhatsApp groups, we have guys doing all this stuff. This is happening, right? And a lot of these young people could be doing this stuff, could be talking
yes,
about
but you still haven't addressed a fundamental. Yes, you can use chat and Bing, for example, to churn out a song or a poem, for example. But the fundamental question when you give it when the student uses this, where does this intellectual property reside? If I get you to write my essay for me, that essay is no longer mine, it is yours. And when I hear people talk about ethics, I heard one person say we're going to introduce civics in school. Civics is not ethics. Civics is a subsection of ethics. And by the time students reach the university level, for example, their social behaviors, mores, norms, for example, are generally set. And having an ethical compass around to be able to use things in that way can be very difficult. So yes, the ethics of it will be there, but you have education now that is commercialized and not education for education's sake. If I just want the degree, I really don't care about ethics. I am going to do what is necessary to get that degree. And if you are not willing as a teacher to see that a student is using this AI you're going to have school-based assessments being inflated and sent in, and you're going to only know what transpired on the day of the exam when they produce a fantastic SBA, but they can't write the S in the exam because they were using AI all along. The university is fortunate to have Turnitin, one of the detectors of AI. How many schools in Barbados have access to Turnitin to detect AI written essays and school-based assessments? How many?
Dr. Bloom, this is very process. I follow this process. Education and awareness comes first. So if, for example, students invite me, or even you come and talk to me, come and talk to students, as they have done for a number of years, I speak to education and awareness, challenges, problems, even things like cybercrime and scams and all that sort of thing. I put all of that there up front, but then I bring the opportunities. So, for example, in the area of IP and intellectual property, for example, an NFT, the blockchain is ideally designed for that, because regardless of whatever you post as an NFT, regardless of whether, for example, you do your original work at BCC and you create a wonderful painting, and then you digitize that painting and you put that digitized painting, your own work, on the blockchain. It recognizes that this is a unique product created by Dr. Broom, and therefore another product similar to that, they're coming onto the blockchain that claiming to be same thing that Dr. Broom done will be rejected. Now, is everything open that it cannot be subjected to some form of plagiarism or whatever? Yes, you can always find some way bad actors to do certain things, but the blockchain does help you in terms of identifying that work that you posted, you designed, and you created, and you minted as an NFT on the blockchain. It has all the traceability, all the tracking, all the information to show that that was unique work done by Dr. Broom, not by Hallam Hope. So it helps, there are areas there that can help Dr. Broom. That's all I'm saying.
I'm glad for your optimism and enthusiasm. I'm thrilled.
All right.
We talk to your students sometimes. You gotta go though.
Yes.
Talk all
So again, because certainly we continue the conversation, and certainly participants stayed on to gain more information about, AI, and your comments, Hallam, your comments, Dr. Broom, and the comments from the presenters. But we do want to say to stay tuned for part 2. We will come at this again. We do see that there's keen interest, and there's certainly much more to discuss. Once more, thank you sincerely for joining. We at the BCSI really appreciate your contributions and your attendance. I do want to wish you a fantastic day and an enjoyable weekend. Stay
Thank
safe,
you.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Right.
Stay safe.
Alan and Mr. Millington, I will call you.
Okay.
Okay.